So an update to the playlist, which is only 9 months old. This is going to be a semi-continuation of the Operation Armour playlist as indicated by the title, and the playlist which it will be under. Because while this isn't explicitly how I expected or wanted or was looking to continue the thematic discussion, it's kind of how it ended up anyway. So as sort of background to what a stop tank is, it's the type of build that the clan stop uses on PC. So they aren't on Xbox or PlayStation at all, to my knowledge, but in any case, the premise is very similar to what I was attempting to achieve with this whole thing anyway, which is to basically be super large and beefy. So Average Fire Dog, very ironically named, made this post a few months ago, and it's been sort of living in the back of my head since. So I ended up this past week sort of just making one as a result of a couple factors coming together. So this is my continuation of it via the aforementioned, hey, you're right, these do suck with the current meta. And wouldn't you know it, my challenges for today, or rather that are from yesterday that I haven't completed yet, are to get 5 wins with cannon builds. So this is just a phenomenal time for me to check out and showcase and everything. So to begin with, as far as the actual build itself, the premise has been largely the same since their inception, so I'm told, where it is a super heavy cannon build running Goliaths as armor. So I've also kind of touched on that topic earlier and how it's not really super effective, but nonetheless, that is how she's going with the build and how she's going with the stream. So as far as what we've got, that's the market, is this bad boy. So had a few factors come together, like I said, which ended up causing this to be created, as it were. So I ended up getting the mass fused cohort from the guaranteed upgrade / crafting thing that's currently going on for the season, which has been a fairly long time goal of mine, and now had the funds to do it. Plus, now that we have downgrade events, it's possible for me to downgrade my pre-upgraded one from the Doomsday Cars Battle Pass and then sell it. So I figured even less reason to hold off on this. So that was a fairly hefty bump to the amount of mass I can add on this thing. It puts it from, was it, I think 15,000 effective tonnage or effective mass limit to 17,500. It's pretty gnarly. And then obviously the mass upgrade as well gives us a little bit more to play around with. So as compared to our other one, a lot more limited. So the other thing is just that I'm at the stage where I'm currently using the Mastodon anyway for the Relic Cannon trial, so works great on this build. And I had an extra mammoth anyway because I was able to pick some back up after I used some to craft the mammoth during the cheaper uranium thing. So that on top of the Pegasus engine, which we got a little while ago, and the tonnage changes to the tracks, gives us a little bit more room to play around with things, which is nice. So theoretically, the only thing I'm missing on this build for making it even chonkier is to have, minus mass fusions on everything in order to have more mass available for armor, and then having the mass limit fusion on the Pegasus, which they also just buffed. So instead of the 10% power or the 3% mass, you could have 10% mass, which would give another 370 mass. But obviously, while that would be cool and all, not exactly in the mood to spend 6,000 to have to try and do a YOLO fuse and get it. And again, it's only 400 kilos out of 31,000. So not super concerned. Now, as far as how this ties into Operation Armour itself, the advent of these new items basically changed the silly me, I didn't reopen it when it crashed. Basically changed the calculations on what you can actually do with it. So for some background for that, and the math-driven component of this, in earlier parts of the playlist, we were looking at how damage, resistance, and reduction stack, as well as how the armor calculation is made based off of the Dura per mass and Dura per part limits. So I did kind of revisit that with this. And as a result of it being just sort of offhand math, it's just me bloating up another page entirely. So what we were originally looking at was some like this, which was running basically the least parts possible for the build and the least mass possible while still being somewhat viable in order to have the most mass available for armor. And when you ended up doing that, you had very little mass taken up by these things, so you ended up basically being able to throw on the heaviest parts, the most durable parts to begin with from front to back. So that kicks up the cabin dura quite a bit. Now, I also mentioned how effective durability is a thing and how there are differences for that. Now, keeping in mind that this isn't quite our goal since we're using literally the heaviest weapons in the game, but again, these numbers sort of shifted as a few of the new things came out. So to begin with, the Pegasus is now a thing, which means we can get even more mass limit than this bad boy, but we also do lose our speed increase, so that decreases the efficacy of both the meat grinders and the Goliaths, which we ended up using, but it does allow you to use something like the Atoms somewhat effectively, although they're less efficient, which we'll get to. So as far as having as much mass as possible for armor, you just throw on all the high durability parts from high to low because you have so much mass. Now, when you ended up using these heavier parts, you lose a lot of available mass because these things are chonkers. So I have slightly less as a result of it being a Mastodon and Mammoth, but you can see the mass difference is fairly minor, and under ideal circumstances you'd be using the mass fusion anyway, which I also don't have on this build. So suffice to say, with this being the pre-armoring statistics of the build, you have significantly less opportunity for, well, doing anything for armor. So that changed the approach of it a bit. I did some calculations where we were looking at, under ideal circumstances, even with the mass, how much would you have available if you did stick with the Mastodon? And then this is also assuming you use the Odin, which isn't terribly realistic for most people at this point, but I mean, I guess if you have mass fuse Mastodon anyway, more or reasonably attainable. In any case, you just knock that down to an Apollo or Thor fairly easily. Like I said, knock down the Mastodons for Mammoths or whatever, remove the one extra energy, which in this case I decided to put on a verifier. But nonetheless, the calculation, ideal circumstances, ended up being that you had about 306 mass per part. So if we went and we looked at the structural list and we sorted it for bullet durability per mass, we ended up having most of the super efficient parts, of course, being the damage pass-through or the extremely lightweight parts. But because we have such mass available, you ended up having to scroll pretty far down the list, and you're back in the neighborhood of the Founders and Steppenwolf's parts as per usual. So what that means is that theoretically you slap all of those on, you get a whole bunch of Dura. I haven't actually done the calculation for this, as you can see, which is maybe my mistake, but in any case, knowing that, I also needed to know what movement parts I was going to use. So I did calculations with what would be the most efficient for durability per mass. Now, these things super hardly sway the results because wheels are really good durability for mass. Even though they might not actually synergize with the build well, they don't actually add to your cabin durability, of course, although they do increase the overall build durability. And they're going to bloat your parts count when you're only adding something with 45 mass to 20,000. So you could always use Bigfoots, which are a lot closer to those numbers, and again, they are incredibly tanky and also a lot larger and thus easier to use, but I didn't exactly want to zap my power drain down to 0. So, including the approximate structural durability per mass, so this is a calculation of not only the durability of the part itself, but also the approximate bullet durability per mass, because losing 1, 4, 6 parts to here isn't going to significantly increase this value, because it doesn't significantly increase this value. So this is a calculation of the durability of the part plus whatever the effective tonnage, so the tonnage minus the mass, because of course some of that is taken up by the mass of the actual thing itself. So the effective tonnage times the approximate durability per mass you get at that. So mass times dura over mass just cancels in as a durability calculation. So we add that to the other durability, and then we divide that by. This is a bit of a redundant calculation, honestly, because we're both adding and subtracting the mass, but effectively it's just trying to mirror the top of the calculation where we take the mass of the item and then the effective the effective tonnage of the parts used. But realistically, the calculation for this is literally just going to be the total mass of it, which is going to be equivalent to, the tonnage, but whatever. So that's that calculation, and then I also ended up having a sorted list over here. So this section is disjointed from this section. This is in a completely different order, just showing the final value. But in any case, you can see that the list is basically entirely the same as here, except the STs are more efficient, which is kind of unintuitive. But the reason behind that is because the durability per mass of the wheels by themselves so outweighs the durability per mass of any armor slapped on at the 300 mass. Of course, again, if this value was much lower, you could kick up to just running buggy parts and having ridiculous bullet durability. But for this mass, this part count, and these parts, in any case, the armor durability doesn't really matter. So you actually want to have the highest dura per mass of the part, and then the lowest per mass of armoring. So as a result, the best options end up mirroring that. So you're looking at incredibly light wheels with incredibly low tonnage that have very good dura per mass, and then the calculations as a result. So now this wasn't particularly useful information since, again, I don't want to use wheels, and it basically shoves all of the non-steering wheels ahead of most of the other parts anyway, but it does sort of give a overall good view of a gradient of what ends up being more or less efficient. So like Icarus are known to be terrible for armoring. The main benefit of them is the hover capabilities, not that they're great for hauling mass around. And so this is sort of just a good way to frame, in my eyes at least, the parts that you're looking at. So theoretically I could separate this into a wheels list and then a non-wheels list, but in any case it's simple enough to go through and see that your options for tracks that are more efficient end up being the more medium ones, and then you end up having the heavier ones a bit further down, which again follows intuition. But when you look at it from a durability per part perspective, obviously the Goliath is chonky, because not only are you going to be getting the ridiculous amount of durability from it to begin with, but then you also get a enormous amount of tonnage, which also gives you more armor. So while, again, all of the armor is worse than the parts themselves, because all of these parts are better, they're all basically graded on the same spectrum of, okay, you literally can't go above these values, but what is more heavily impacted. So whether or not that ends up making any sense or is of any use later on, I don't know. In any case, I decided I didn't want to lose like half of my parts limit. I should probably make sure this doesn't time out on us for having a bunch of hardened tracks. But in theory, if this is the sort of approach you're taking for it, it would probably work fairly well. So I don't know. There's an idea for anybody else who wants to mess around with it. Or, Sabbaths are just straight overpowered, so there's not really a whole lot of reason not to just run those on practically any build. But in any case, for the purposes of this, I decided to go with Goliath because it just makes armoring a lot easier. And so that's where the build in my garage started, based off of this, and then the calculations, and then the approximate mass per part. So then I looked at this and said, okay, well, obviously we're losing a lot of mass, and these are the correct values, so this does include the upgrades I have. But the tonnage more or less works out. If we slapped in a Geagle instead, which so far I haven't been motivated enough to do, but in theory is a perfectly good option, especially because the Goliaths are, still the slowest part in the game. But I didn't do that so far, because again, our goal, this is to be chonk. So it kind of diverges from op armor a little bit, but like I said, it's still kind of related, and I said I was going to make this video for the original poster anyway, because they were interested in the premise and its performance on Xbox, and, well, just console in general, as a result of us theoretically having less people running M&K or hit scan weapons with hyper precision. Unfortunately, I don't think it turns out working that way, especially with the current state of balance. Things like Catalinas, Retchers, miniguns, even Toadfish are incredibly prominent. We're at the super high power score, so we're also dealing with Scorpions, which just win, period, against these sort of builds. I think you'd basically have to do the same thing as every other build at the high power score and have the V-shaped bunkered spider in order to have some semblance of weapon durability. But in any case, that wasn't the purpose of this, so we're not doing that, and as a result, the consequences are the suffering of our performance. In any case, that leads us to this, which is the current state of the build. So, a reminder that for people on PC, our values are approximately 3 times, so you can look at this at being a approximately 16,000 coin build, but that also doesn't include any of the upgraded items, so it's actually it's a fairly expensive build. I mean, anything that has relics in any capacity is going to be the case. And not only do we have a Mastodon, we also have the Warg paint, so you better be ready to, cough up some mad coin there. But in any case, the decor that I stuck with, as is listed in the spreadsheet, is the decor which has the best durability, the best power, the best reputation increase, which is based off the tier of it. So legendary ones are always 5% by mass, because we don't care about durability, because damage just passes through decor, and we don't care about power score because we're making a fucking chunker. So it's just literally whatever's the most efficient to that. And then I also put in the Call of the Spirit's Horn because it's spooky, and I had the space for it, and I don't care about 1% reputation bonus. So that was that, and the reason why it showed up in the calculation. And man, Xbox does not. See, I'm playing on the 2G network that's right above my head, and it's still struggling. I didn't have any of these issues with the Xbox console companion. They still retired it, released a new one which doesn't work nearly as well. Amazing. Anyway, so for other parts, this is pretty much exactly what was on the list, and then me armoring it up. So you might note that using Steppenwolf's parts is in less supply than I normally do, which I slap that bad boy on everything. But Steppenwolf parts are best for durability per part and durability per power score, but they're not actually best for durability per mass. And mass is technically not as much of a concern on this as like lighter builds, but again, we're looking at a durability per mass of about 130 something with this specific configuration. So we can't just go on and slap those, 400 mass parts. So to that end, when you end up looking at the structural list and looking for the mass per part of about 139, you end up getting a lot of the lighter parts, which of course makes sense. And I gotta say, a lot of these don't fit very nice with each other. So for instance, canvas roof is a good size. The Torero bonnet is a good size and shape. The rear doors are a good shape, but things like the Avia slopes or the Avia fenders, those things don't really play nice, especially if you're trying to pack into a specific space, which is what we are trying to do. Since it's, for Goliaths, we have to build around those rather large things which are directly adjacent to the cabin. So I ended up kind of taking out some of these anyway, so I didn't end up using the dual slopes or the air intakes or the fenders, for instance, amongst others, just because their shape was extremely awkward to work with inside of the vehicle, and I feel like putting armor on the outside of the vehicle is fairly unnecessary for the purposes of it. So to that end, like I said, I used a few of those more efficient parts, especially where space would allow, and then worked around that. So that is also meaning that I am not going to end up being the same as this, which I said, like, I made a version and it sucked, and they're like, well, is it this or is it like similar to? And it's definitely similar to, and the reason being that there were some design decisions that, like I just said, I came to different conclusions based off of what I was trying to achieve. So for instance, the gallery here, which doesn't make things very easy, but I'll pull it up anyway. So for instance, they have augers that they use to allow for the build to strafe. I personally didn't want to lose 6,000 kilos when I already had very little mass available to just the movement parts on top of the Goliaths. I mean, maybe if I had fused the Goliaths and the augers, maybe, but even then, it makes you go significantly further over tonnage than I care to. So for instance, with all of the plus mass stuff working on this build, even before they increased the Goliath's tonnage, it was more than sufficient. And now we go over enough by you could almost get away with just running 3, but of course using 3 Goliaths is incredibly difficult to make a build around, so I didn't do that as well. But just for, again, trying to keep as much mass available as reasonable, especially with how much is already getting eaten up by the weapons, is fairly limiting. So I didn't use augers on it. And I don't feel like that would have made such a huge difference in performance, but, maybe they didn't end up using reputation bonus because this is a heavy Clan Wars build, so the performance cost wouldn't be worth it. They went straight up to the parts limit. As a result of using augers, they use a lot more of the narrower frames, so that changed the part count very heavily against their favor, but they also fused the shit out of everything, including the Mastodon, so they got quite a bit of mass back. So, like I said, a lot of factors that didn't end up being the same. So, likewise, they are pretty adamant, it would seem, on having the spaced out front of the gun there, over in front of the Mastodon, to, obviously work as protecting it, and then also I found out allows it to actually shoot things directly in front of you, because on my build I just have a freight train plow in front of it, which I feel like is fairly sufficient for actually guarding it, but as a result, if people do just smack their face up to mine, I can't fire because my barrel doesn't actually have clearance. So this might be something where I go back and try this out again in the future. Maybe, I don't know, the shape is going to be different. They also ended up having their front mastodon mounted higher and the front pair of Goliaths further out. So here's a good example. So it's further up, and these are further back than on mine, which allows you to have this whole configuration on the front. But then, unless you're at an angle, it also means that this back weapon is fairly blocked in being able to shoot down in front of you. And I don't have a projectile speed fuse or anything, so while I will continue trying to snipe with the Mastodons, they're not really well suited to it to begin with. And then I'm also using a Mastodon here, so while I have higher clearance off the ground, I didn't want to continue sticking it up higher and higher in order to get the clearance off of it. So there you go, average fire dog. That's sort of the explanation of why it's a variant of rather than a copy, even though, with all the math I do, I understand that a lot of bumpers and damage pass-through parts are going to be more effective for armoring it. But again, the most issues I've had is particularly with them shooting off my guns, which I don't think moving it up and pushing it a little bit further back is going to unfortunately correct. So to that end, as far as the build itself, started off fairly straightforward. I got a freight train plow because it's the single heaviest duty, highest durability part in the game. Slapped it right underneath of the bad boy, and then I slapped an inverter to both of them because I figured for the most part I would risk being degunned rather than having my cabin die to direct damage. I was right about that. And that the Omamori and its new cycling mechanism means that it probably wouldn't last long enough to protect the Mastodon, which I was also right about. That being said, as per usual with the whole D-res versus D-red calculations, a 50% damage reduction is significantly better than a 30% damage resistance addition, which is what the inverter does. So, if you end up fitting a barrier on this build, which would be a hell of a lot easier if you had Odin or an Aegis or literally anything to prevent them from shooting your gun more than, 800 damage at a time, then that would make this weapon significantly more durable. At the same time, with its current location, we'd kind of be double dipping on it taking damage alongside the freight train plow, unless we pulled it back and literally was just only boosting the Mastodon. So, it sort of depends on how stubborn you are on not having that one piece removed. So maybe even with the scope of today, I have a little bit of extra mass available. Maybe I'll throw the Omamori in there. I don't know. In any case, so freight train plow, that's attached to the inverter. Due to the placement of it, it is no longer attached to the Mastodon, but that doesn't really seem like an issue because I haven't been porked to death a whole lot, and even if I did, I feel like I'd probably be okay with the 8x4 heavy frame. Have the Iris sitting there as well because we're using 8x frames that have to have a 1 pip overlap with the cabin in order to be directly attached. So there is a 7x2x2 gap there. Well, 7x2x2 and then a 8x2x2 as a result of the nook of the integral fender, wheel well, whatever. So I just replaced that with that because, again, using one of the better durability per mass parts to sort of offset me using a shit ton of heavy frames, which I might swap out for light frames because, again, I've had nearly zero issue with actually being deframed or dying due to fire damage. And then we have a little bit of armor around the back and sides of this. I mean, it's not actually protecting, it's just increasing our vehicle durability. Also catches a few shots aimed at the cabin once the gun is gone, which happens a lot. For the back part, this got a little wonky. So we have our engine on top of our generator in the middle because it was just the most convenient place for me to stick these. There's a little nook that I put the horn in that I mentioned. Then we have the flywheel in front, which has a little bit of a stick out due to the Apollo being 6x6 effectively because the corners are cut off again, and the Pegasus being 5x6. So in theory you could have shoved this further and then put something here instead, but I was like, well, what am I gonna put there? So I just put a small buggy floor over there instead. But again, you have options. So then we have a shit ton of armor wrapped around it using whatever shapes were most convenient, based off of, again, working around the other Goliaths. The mammoth sitting on top, which has yet to be destroyed by having the Pegasus or this really super handy small buggy floor there destroyed. It's just straight up been stripped every time. Because it's enormous and hefty and it's kind of hard to protect. Then we have some layers of, again, those better durability per mass parts at the back. Not that retchers will be stopped for very long with this. And then we just have our super heavy armor parts for the remaining mass, which is also why we don't go up until the parts count total. Because I said, fuck it, I have the room, I have the mass, and I want the durability. So we'll just put these around as a way to hopefully protect the mammoth a little bit more. Yeah, spoiler alert, it doesn't really protect it at all. So yeah, that's the build. And like I said, I still kept the decor on. I still have the heavy the heavy frames. My weapons are not mass fused, so there's definitely still quite a bit of room to improve on this. But you know, even then, fairly happy with it in theory. Like, this is, I mean, by far the heaviest build I've made. It feels very tanky and strong. I mean, like I said, it gets absolutely whooped in PvP, but, you know, such is the life of tank builds. But pretty decent. And then even without a durability fusion or all the mass things, as a result of us cutting out those augers, we actually have fairly comparable cabin durability. Not that it really matters. And then we also have a chunky amount of total vehicle durability, but again, that's not really super relevant. The big thing is that I don't lose the Goliaths, I don't lose the modules, I don't lose the cabin until a fair amount of time after I lose the weapons. So to that end, the room for improvement is probably performance on my end and trying to protect the weapons more, but you know, fairly limited options, especially while we're going 55 kph. So this might be something I iterate on some more again in the future, maybe slap a Geagle on, Homamori, etc. But for the sake of what the goal of this was, which is to be super hefty, it works. So yeah, now as far as performance, like I said, the wins for today are going to be cannons and turrets. I'm gonna be straight up with you. These wins, these are all when I was playing at the 10,000 power score with the single masty. And the high speed build, because agility is king in this game. This thing's performance is like literally 24 losses and 1 win. So I am not going to pretend that this is going to go well, but for the sake of showcasing it and or embarrassing my own skills or lack thereof in the game, we'll do some with it. And I will go ahead and mute myself in game off the hop because the app keeps not caring to save that setting. Mute. And of course we're going to get different lobbies now because it's, you know, mid-afternoon than like when I normally play, but c'est la vie. So for what it's worth too, I did originally try making this a forward driving and facing vehicle, as per the stop tanks though. It just being rear facing is just so much easier if for no other reason than the wedge protection, and also so that the gun can actually have some sort of gun depression, because if you have it just on the front, you'd lose all of your angles unless you throw frames exposed out into the air. So lobbies are not rocking today. Anyway, as far as the So as far as the gun depression on the Mammoth, like I said, because I pulled the mastodon back a little bit, I mean, I can basically shoot directly in front of me. Not like that's been too big of a concern, but it is an option. So fairly happy with how that worked out. Not happy with the meta just being everybody being hovers flying around at 90 kph, dodging all my shots, and blasting my weapons off with their ridiculously high sustained DPS weapons faster than I can even reload and shoot a second time. But, you know, me how it knew. And mine too, I was even playing with Bang Shield up here, so this wasn't just me. Like, it was me and a teammate, which tends to be a pretty big boon, other than when you're, you know, fighting other multiple stacks of players. And to be fair, that's what was happening. We were getting ganked by, you know, clans with entire sets of relics. But I wasn't exactly lone wolfing it like I am right now, and still the performance was rough. Oh, there we go. First time I've actually lost a glide. But I think it'll probably continue happening because, again, I can't really out-sustain damage this dude is on my ass, and the teammates are not really helping me, so. Oh, hey, there we go. We got one of the red shoes. Got another, but I'm also, you know, completely exposed here. So there we go. First instance of me losing my Goliaths with this build, because I was explicitly getting trolled by a retro user. Funny that. There we go. And honestly, again, getting a kill before I died is still better than most of the performance. I think we might actually win this, but no small part of that is going to be due to the teammates seeming to thrash the rest of the lobby while I was dealing with that one dude. But I tanked him. He was a good tank for the team. Hero, baby. But yeah, lots of dogs, lots of hovers, lots of spiders. So everything going at least 50% faster than me. Lots of sustained weapons. Lots of fast projectiles. Mobile builds combined. And the Catalina meta makes it just very hard to be effective. I mean, theoretically, the best use of the build is to, you know, peek, take shots, peek, but it's hard to do that at 55 kph. At best, you can kind of do it with the Goliaths, but again, everybody being at least 50% faster than you and significantly higher damage per second than you sort of means that you lose pretty much every damage race. See, and this is... okay. The teammate not playing well and running directly at somebody who's sniping him. Right. But again, still, actually, like, a closer lobby than the rest of the other ones were, so. Not too shabby. And still scored fairly decently better than most of them on their team, funny enough. For what it's worth, too, in the event, Rise of the Machines and my theorizing for it generally included having a sort of tanky player. And to be fair, I tried that there, but the rest of the team didn't really want to stick together with me, which is unfortunate because, again, I only go 55 kph. So I ended up getting completely thrashed by way of, I think, 12 as soon as there was more than 3 enemies around me. Again, these weapons are not good at sustained damage. So that tended to cause issues, to say the least. But, I mean, ideally, you know, if you're doing that, you're doing an endurance run, you're going to be running the... basically that build, a pork spider anyway, so... Oh, sorry, buddy. Oh. Fat of. That dude's probably gonna loop around us. We got all sorts of friends over there. But I'm kind of worried about... Oh, never mind, he went to go cap. Better than coming up on my ass. Alright, bro, you have fun over there. He's already dead. Kill this guy, bro. We got a 3v4. Yeah, we're just gonna get taken down, baby. Oh, I feel the same way, bro. Believe you me. I was the one who was walking away from the 1v3 situation and it still didn't stop it. Yeah, there goes the one gun. There goes the live. And there goes me. So that's very much more how it goes, where again it's just the normal meta, which is just damage race, get a player count advantage, and then swarm the remainders. So I don't really expect to see a whole lot of difference from that, but again, first match was actually surprisingly decent. Especially unlikely that it's going to improve when we get duplicate lobbies. We also even had a 21,000 last match, which is insane. And we didn't even kill more, what was it, 2, maybe 3 of them? And now I'm the highest power score here, despite honestly probably being the lowest performing build. And that's the worst part of it, probably. Like, this is not a late game build. This is an end game build. This is a significant cost, time investment, even just for getting the parts from the badge exchange, from the prestiging factions, and yet it can't even, like, honestly, I'd be surprised if this consistently did well against builds that were like 12,000 power score. Like I said, my 10,000 power score build performs better than this. And it's a single Mastodon with twice the mobility. Am I not like it would be likely to win in these fights either, but I honestly think it would probably have a better chance. Which is crazy to say with these guys being double the power score that, but... Oh, don't pop my shots. Love when they have their auto-aiming weapons though, because they're not going to be very effective at hitting what they want to hit. So I got that going for me. Fortunately, that dude's got a retro tower going against him, so... They're gone. That's an Akari. Shotguns, I can actually sometimes do stuff against them, because they need to stay close. It's also incredibly hard to hit any of these guys' juicy bits. Especially weapons, not even if they're just bunkered, but, or not even when they're bunkered, which is obviously still a thing, but even when they just have them on top of their build, like, it's kind of hard to aim a cannon shot at something moving around at 90 kph and hit a specific point, especially with how, like, penetration works in their favor, certainly, but like it's still a fairly large hitbox. It's going to hit a bunch of other things first. See, that guy's being an annoyance, but they also deal like shit for damage, so it doesn't really matter. Lucky for me. Probably gonna strip my weapon though, knowing my luck. Oh, hi. Hi as well. That was a Goliath gone, I felt that. Yeah. There's the Masty gone. And like, theoretically I could have run the neutrino on this, but there was zero chance that he was actually going to stay alive for any reasonable amount of time. And then, like I said, sniping juicy bits is just not a thing that happens with the Mastodon. So I think that's probably a better showcase of the build. Actually did something against most of these guys, but at the same time, like, comparatively, and especially, you know, again, they knock out a couple of people early, and then it's a 1v4. Like, it's like with this guy, he lost what, 2-3 of his guns almost immediately, and then just got cucked immediately after. Because like, what are you going to do against 4 builds, right? I'm going to go let the dog in because he's barking. Now, to the credit of the community, despite generally being very salty, unfortunately it follows. Okay, well, we had a pretty decent chance there until the rest of their team showed up. Unfortunately, it followed just like with practically every other environment I've been in, that the higher tier players aren't any, you know, better at the game, or certainly not more prone to being good sports of the game. The higher you get in these lobbies, the saltier everybody tends to get by far. So you might notice that there's a significant volume of people that I have blocked. That's basically anytime somebody does anything on comms other than anything useful. So if they're blasting music, if they're mouth breathing, if they got kids crying in the background, if they're raging at their teammates for reasons undiscernible, etc., I immediately block them. And so that's why there's like so many players blocked, even with the bots also being counted as it. So yeah, I haven't gotten any hate mail, but I think, like I said, it's kind of because all the people being jerks kind of just self-select, and I basically block them immediately. So that was wild though. We had one dude on their team rush us 3, and I was thinking, oh man, this is going to be an easy kill. And then the other 3 of our team, I guess, got getting beat by the other 5, and then they joined in before we even dealt with that one guy, which is wild. I mean, heck, you know, people were saying matches needed to go faster, they're taking too long. Well, the current meta sure is about that. A minute and a half for lobbies. Spend more time in the queue. That dude running Jaboko? That's wild. Oh, that's, yeah, well, that makes a little bit more sense. No, it's Jaboko. I was here the first time. R.I.P. that dude. Come on, just get stripped. Oh, sorry, bro. That's a fuck ton of cap guns. Yeah. Honestly, I think the first time I've run into incinerators at these power scores, like porks, sure. Incinerators, not so much. Which, I mean, makes sense for, you know, relic versus epic tier weapons, I suppose. At 18,000 power score. But that dude just harassing the team now. Can't fault him for that. They had, what, 3 of them follow back into our spawn? So we just gave the entire center of the map to enemies. I think one of the teammates just... Yeah. It's a cheeky weapon placement. Oh, that guy's Jaboko's gone finally. Oh, I got the fortune figured out that he has to go downhill to roll him uphill higher. Shame. Oh shit, he's got porks too. Alright, significantly more worrying than when I just thought it was a machinist with a spark and I laughed. I was like, yeah, sure, push me, bro. That creates more problems. I mean, it's still not a good build because the machinist's not good. Certainly not going 55 kph with porks, but better than I had initially thought. Oh, those are Scorps, so they're gonna tear me apart. High acoustic. Bye acoustic. Oh shit, they got more. Yeah, see, I'm not gonna be able to snipe off any of those parts. They are gonna be able to do it to me for sure. At least ammo isn't an issue when you've got 2 upgraded ammo packs, but that helps. Oh hi, you're much more easily killable, aren't you? Then when your teammate doesn't want to let me, that's fine. I don't need their permission. I do need to start hitting my shots again though. There's another idea, running the oppressor with these bad boys. Wow. I'm probably not even going to kill this dude. To be honest. Still, much better match again. You know, my 55 kph, huge ass slug eating self ain't going to be able to deal with any Scorps whatsoever. But it's kind of crazy because, like, they're just basically better cannons in every way. Like, they are lighter. You don't have to reel as much of them. They deal more damage. Like, the only disadvantage is durability, but again, with how well you can armor them, like, you literally just need like a 2x3, 3x4 at most window available, and then of course with everybody using mouse steering hovers, like, not a whole lot of risk attached compared to this, which is literally countered by them. I'm not even really sure what penguins are supposed to be good at right now, because, like, if we consider the very basic weapon triangle to be machine guns, shotguns, cannons, which is very specifically like set up by the game. It's like, what are the cannons supposed to destroy? Because shotguns get close and strip you because they're you're a huge target. You rotate slow, you can't shoot constantly. But then machine guns can also just stay away and strip you. Like, in theory, maybe they're supposed to outperform machine guns by like one-shotting them, but with all the armoring stuff in game compared to how difficult it is to armor cannons, especially the turret ones, like, you kind of lose to both. Not even including things like retchers, flamethrowers, anything. The biggest thing, I guess, is that cannons are pretty much one of the only burst damage weapons in the game. And when they don't outperform the sustained damage, is to say that they don't outperform anything. But I'm not unwilling to consider that perhaps I just suck with them and I suck at the game. But based off of what I've seen, it seems unlikely. I'm sorry, bro, I'm trying to help. You guys are all floating in the way of each other, man. Okay, I see. I wouldn't want to be here either. Yeah, like, I can't outrange them, can't outdamage them. Taking a shot more from them doesn't really matter. It's interesting too, because your damage potential with using the full hold fire on Mastodon actually significantly decreases your damage per second, unless you have two Mastodons and can keep the enemy perma-heated. But that's not the case with my current build, nor anybody else who has them both on one trigger for reasons undiscernible. Yeah, there we go. See, that is a bunkered double masty build. That's having a good time. Me, not so much. Even though, again, they have it all on one trigger. Because they're sillies. So, like, the thing is, like, if it is just me sucking, being bad at the game or whatever, like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do in order to get better. Like, this is, like I said, sans upgrading or other trade-offs for choosing different parts. Like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to be able to do any of this better. And upgrading is obviously prohibitively expensive at this point. Like, even porks are better versions of cannons, really, because they have enough range to not really matter that they roll on the ground, especially if you're clever about it. They have significantly faster fire rate. They constantly heat rather than just, on that first shot for the one of them. There's not a whole lot of benefits to it, is there? So yeah, this is much more what it was, kind of like. And the thing is, like, too, it's like, I don't even think it's fair to say that it's, let's assume that it is me, or it is the build sucking. Is it really so poorly made, so under-optimized, that it causes the entire rest of the team to also die before any person can even get one kill per teammate? I don't think so. Like, I think you'd have to be actively, purposefully hindering your team at that point, either by, like, blocking them or flipping them or something. Like, I don't know that I've ever come across a non-trolling, non-griefing teammate that legitimately was dragging down the team. Like, for the most part, it's somebody being bad in, like, whatever, now they're a meat shield, or them being, like, somebody who's AFK or quit or whatever, in which case, okay, well, now it's just a player disadvantage, and that doesn't guarantee a game loss. It just makes it harder, And if anything, there's been a few times where the enemies get cocky as a result of us being down a person, and then it ending up being easier to kind of ambush them. So you know, especially when I'm the highest power score on the team and half the team is bots. And they gave them an 18,000 and a 17,000, and they're like, don't worry, we'll balance it out with bots. Are you going to give us a 19,000 bot? No. We'll give it to them instead. Great balancing. So then the question is, okay, well, if my build and gameplay isn't so terrible that it's literally bringing down the team and causing a loss every time, then what is? And it just seems to be the meta being so, like, heavily slanted currently. Also, I don't think I'm going to be terribly useful here with all these lag I'm getting either. These bots kind of stand still. Kind of funny too. It's, you know, funny but sad. Like, the reason why I did this and I'm doing this rather than the like 10,000 power score, which, like I said, is so much easier in every way, shape, and form, is because, like, not only is this kind of build sort of like what I've always been doing and what I've been like aiming for and trying to do and whatnot, but like in theory, being a frontline tank, distracting people, maybe chopping off a couple of like important bits on their build is like legitimately a good idea, but it sure doesn't perform that way here. No, I don't want to get sniped, thanks. See, and we're winning this one pretty heavily, and I could not even tell you why that is. But if I were to take a guess, I'd imagine... Oh shit, sorry bro. I didn't expect to get stuck on you like that. If I had to take a guess, I'd imagine probably bot mismatching, and that... Thanks, Tracy. And then, like, the two teammates running the meta bunkered sustained damage weapons on spiders. Oh, those are scorps, I don't like that. Oh, they're all scorps, okay. Wow. Oh, the clever switchback. There you go, fat win for us, but was it super one-sided? Yeah. I mean, hell, even two bots significantly outscored me and Boomer. Oh, and they were even a group. Yeah. Wild. Yeah, but I don't know. And like, too, I get that, like, technically free rotating weapons placed on top of the build is just objectively a poor idea. Like, especially, like, not even including the meta of people hella bunkering weapons, so I can't even, like, match blow for blow well. Not even taking into account the hypermobility of practically every build that isn't a track build. Not even taking into account, like, skill levels or upgrade differences or anything, like with the meta being omnidirectional parts that also are consistently taller than my vehicle. Like, it's not like I'm really doing anything to protect my weapons effectively from hovers or spiders at all. So, like, in theory, this entire build idea is sort of just, like, objectively a poor idea from the start, I guess. But, like, it feels like you shouldn't have to be hyper-optimized to have a chance, you know? Speaking of chances, we got a 3-stack that we're against, so this will be fun. Because, like, when I started this game, I was literally... Well, not start, but, like, a couple months in, I was literally running a whirl and 2 tacklers on a carapace with 2 Goliaths, and that thing fucking slapped. I was getting 2 kills a match easy by myself. But now I'm running the heaviest, most durable parts in the game, and I can't even kill people running legendary weapons. It's rough. Hell, I had an elephant and 2 tacklers and was performing better than this. That is a wall. Thank you for standing still, Helga. Very convenient. And then when the environment also blocks my shots with the Masty, which happens quite a bit because it's significantly lower than my Masty. Or sorry, than my Mammoth. There you go, got a kill on the pro, and I just gotta do that 4, 5 more times while they're constantly peppering me. Like, credit where it's due, this thing fucking slaps if I hit him. If I hit, like, something that isn't just a damage pass-through wing that they have, and then my shot goes into the void. Like, it hurts him if I hit something solid. It's just kind of inconsistently doing that. In no small part to me, my accuracy, lack thereof. But also because the fire rate and the whole mobility meta. Yeah, that is the match being over. I'm like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna chew through the front of this dude's build? His fucking 4,000 spaced armor? I don't think so. Like, if I get around him, shoot him in the butt, it'll probably be fairly effective. You know, it's hard to do. Flank people with no cloaking and only going 55 kph, especially when they just turn in place and then suddenly I'm in front of their guns again. I don't think either of the teammates realize this match is over. I'm just being played with. So that was... to the bots didn't even get contribution. Alright. Perfectly balanced matchmaking, as per usual. I don't know, I guess the long story short is it just feels like things are way too swingy in this game, that like each of the aspects, the upgrading, the grouping, what the bots are, what the bots AI decide to do, mobility versus tanking, all of it, I feel like all of them are just like there's too strong of a discrepancy to one side, and it's consistent in a way that all these different effects stack and synergize. We end up having this almost like this gap. You can't, there's a term for it and that's escaping me now, but like this it ends up with a gap which you can't do anything about. Like, I don't even know, even with all those changes that I mentioned to the build, even if I made it like identical to the stop tank and gave augers and stuff, like they're still saying it doesn't work. It just doesn't work even in low level clan wars. So like my hope for it actually being effective here is fairly restricted, insofar as like if I'm playing specifically for the canon trials and we're consistently not even killing 2 or 3 of them in the lobbies where I am, even if I'm not the main contributor to that or otherwise, but just like in general, the lobbies I'm in, regardless of whose fault it is or isn't, I'm not getting those, it's like, why even bother? And it's like, I'm trying to play and enjoy the game with this hyper heavy tank, bruh. And then I get things like this, like a 4-stack lobby where 3 of them are a higher power score than me, and then it also gives high-level bots. Like, makes it hard to enjoy the game, you know? It's like, the game is like, yeah, if you want to have fun with your tank build, with your cannons, yeah, you're gonna have to go into PvE, bro. And you can't even do the Rise of the Machines event, because it's not even good there. You're just gonna have to do hard raids, which you're woefully overpowered for, because it's built around 10,000 power score builds, but that's also the only place your 18,000 power score builds can be good. the question if it's really good design that's the case, you know. I couldn't tell if that's a bug or not. Nobody has radar anymore. The fuck was that? There's just an explosion of parts on me. I'm like, I don't even have any parts there, bro. It's literally just my freight train pod. And that definitely didn't get shot off. That guy's trying to do it now, but. Guys, here's an idea. We could have probably done that whole 3v1 thing rather than you guys trying to 2v2. Oh, RIP us. No thanks. But, you know, again, 4 stack of enemies, like, we weren't gonna win this to begin with. Even getting one of them is honestly a fresh surprise to me. Yeah. Honestly, getting the 2 bots on one of them is better than we should have hoped for. Oops. That's whatever. Not what I meant to click. Yeah, so one win so far. I'm not so sure I'm going to be streaming the entire process of me trying to get 5 cannon wins, especially explicitly with this build, because I don't think that's going to happen. Look at that. We got a 2 stack. At least a 2 stack, and we got the power score advantage, which means we actually have a decent chance of winning. I'm thinking we'll go for that 10 match target, which should put us at about an hour and a half of stream. Consider that a fairly sufficient showcase of the build at this power score in PvP. Well, you aren't in range, bro. What are you getting after me for? Well, there goes the team. Oh, that's rude. No big deal, my 30-ton vehicle is being flipped. You know, as one does. Hey, at least I can play it way forward now. Didn't even lose my ammo pack. Probably gonna lose some build to all this shit that I can't do anything about. Let's do that. I have no idea what exactly the teammates were trying to do there. Like their whole, like pretty much that whole match, it was just enemies in a circle around us and everybody in the center getting gang beat on. Like, not exactly a recipe for success, to be fair. Bad at math. Apparently we're already at the 10 match. Okay, well, we'll do another one just for the lulz. Really, you know, diversify our spread of data. Make sure we reduce those margins of error, baby. That's an interesting strategy. But we'll say it worked. And of course, he's just gonna fuck off at twice my speed. Yeah. Excellent. There we go. Did we get a good enough spread to showcase the build and its effectiveness or lack thereof? I don't know, but if I'm gonna have any chance of getting this daily challenge done, never mind my seasonal dailies, in the next 2.5 hours before reset, I think I'm gonna have to drop down to the other build. I do not foresee this suddenly pulling wins out of its ass. So there you go, the fourth video, or part 4. It's not actually the fourth video, it's like the 5th or 6th, but the 4th part of Armour and all of its failings.